Welcome to the Murex Media Podcast. Today we're going to be talking all about the subconscious mind.
Yeah, definitely a fascinating topic and one that I think a lot of our listeners are going to find really interesting.
I think so too. It's something that we all experience every day, but we don't really think about it that much.
Yeah, it's like it's always working in the background, influencing our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors, but it's not something that we're usually consciously aware of.
Exactly. And so in this episode, we're going to kind of pull back the curtain on the subconscious, and we're going to explore what it is, how it works, and how it impacts our lives.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, like, the three-level mind model, and we'll talk about how scientists are actually detecting subconscious activity and some cutting-edge research that might change how you think about your own mind.
Yeah, all that and more. So to kind of kick things off, let's talk about that feeling that we all have when we're learning something new.
Yeah, like riding a bike or learning a new language.
Yeah, exactly. Like at first you have to concentrate so hard on every little detail and it feels really awkward and clumsy. But then one day it just clicks and you're doing it without even thinking about it.
Right, it becomes second nature.
And that's your subconscious mind at work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like all those hours of practice, all those repetitions, they're sinking into your subconscious and they're creating these automatic patterns and responses.
So the subconscious is kind of like a hidden autopilot that takes over once we've mastered a skill.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. And it's not just for physical skills either. It works for mental skills too, like,
Okay.
solving math problems or writing or playing an instrument.
Okay, so then how does this subconscious fit into the bigger picture of our minds? Yeah, how do scientists think about it?
Well, a good starting point is Freud's idea of the three-level mind model.
Oh yeah, Freud, the famous psychoanalyst.
Exactly. His ideas might be a bit outdated now, but this particular model is still useful, I think. He talks about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind.
Yeah, I remember learning about this in Psych 101. So, like the conscious mind is what we're aware of in the moment, right? Our thoughts and feelings and sensations.
Exactly. And then the unconscious mind is like the deepest level. It holds all those repressed memories and instincts and urges that we're not even aware of.
Okay, so where does the subconscious fit in? It sounds like it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, exactly. The subconscious is like a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It's where all those automatic thoughts and behaviors reside, the stuff we do without thinking. It's also where a lot of our beliefs and values and habits are stored.
Okay, so I get the model now, but how do we actually know that the subconscious is real? Like, can scientists actually see it in action?
Well, we can't just point to a specific spot in the brain and say, there it is,
Yeah.
but there are definitely ways to detect its influence.
So how do they do that?
Well, one technique that's really interesting is called priming.
Priming. What's that?
Imagine you're shown a picture of a smiling face for just a fraction of a second, so fast that you don't even consciously register it.
Okay, so it's subliminal.
Yeah, you could say that.
Hmm?
Later, you're shown a neutral image and asked to rate how pleasant you find it. And studies have shown that even though you weren't consciously aware of that fleeting smile, it can still influence your judgment.
Really? So you're saying I might rate the neutral image higher just because I saw a smiling face beforehand, even if I didn't even realize I saw it?
Exactly. It's like the subconscious picks up on that positive emotional cue and it colors your perception of the next thing you see, even though you're not consciously aware of it. And this is just one example. There's a ton of research out there showing how priming can affect everything from our attitudes to our behavior.
Wow, that's kind of creepy, but also really cool.
Yeah, it is. And this leads into a study that I think really demonstrates how scientists can pinpoint the subconscious mind in action. It's a study on facial expressions where participants had to identify the emotions shown in pictures of faces.
Okay, so like happy, sad, angry, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But the pictures were flashed for different lengths of time. So some were shown long enough to be consciously perceived, and others were flashed really fast.
Oh, I see. So some were subliminal and some weren't.
Exactly. What they found was that when the images were flashed for a very short duration, like milliseconds, people could no longer accurately identify the emotion.
So it was just too fast for their conscious mind to process.
Right. But here's the interesting part. When the images were shown for a slightly longer time, people's accuracy dropped significantly, but it wasn't completely gone.
So even though they couldn't consciously see the emotion, something was still registering.
Right. Their subconscious was picking up on it.
So their subconscious mind was processing those facial expressions, even though their conscious mind wasn't.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What does that tell us about how our brains process information?
Well, it suggests that there's this threshold, right? Below a certain speed, information is processed subconsciously, and above that threshold, it enters our conscious awareness.
So it's like our brains are constantly processing information on multiple levels. Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And it makes you wonder what else is happening under the surface that we're not even aware of.
I know, right? Now, I'm curious about the brain itself. Does the brain light up differently when we're thinking consciously versus subconsciously?
That's a great question. And it's something that neuroscientists are actively studying using brain imaging techniques like fMRI.
fMRI, that's the one where they can see the different areas of the brain light up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're finding some really fascinating things. It turns out that conscious and unconscious thought processes actually involve distinct neural pathways.
So it's not just an abstract concept. We can actually see these different levels of processing happening in the brain.
Yeah, we can literally see how the brain lights up differently depending on whether you're thinking consciously or subconsciously. And what's even more intriguing is that the subconscious mind doesn't seem to have its own dedicated pathway. It actually borrows from both the conscious and unconscious routes.
So it's like a blend of deliberate and automatic processing all happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And this could explain why subconscious thoughts can sometimes feel like this mix of intuition and gut feeling.
Okay, so we've talked about how the subconscious can influence our perceptions and even our emotions. But what about bigger decisions? What role does the subconscious play there?
That's where things get really interesting. And that's where we pick things back up on the Merrick's Media podcast, talking about the subconscious mind.
Before we went to, I guess we didn't really go to a break, but before we switched topics, we were talking about how the subconscious can influence our perceptions and our emotions. But now I'm kind of curious about its role in decision making. Do we actually have as much control over our choices as we think we do?
Well, that's a question that's been debated for centuries, really. And there are some fascinating studies that are starting to shed light on it. One study by John Dylan Haynes found that they could actually trace decisions in brain activity up to 10 seconds before people were even consciously aware of making them.
Wait, 10 seconds. You're saying our brains are making decisions before we even know it. That's kind of a freaky thought.
Yeah, it kind of challenges our idea of free will, doesn't it? But it suggests that the subconscious might be a much bigger player in our decision-making than we realize.
So it's not just those gut feelings. We're talking about complex decisions being made on a subconscious level.
Exactly. And there's even research suggesting that we can actually be trained to make better decisions based on unconscious brain activity.
Hold on. Trained to make better decisions without even knowing we're learning. How does that even work?
Well, Dr. Aurelio Cortese and his team found that people could actually be trained to make more rational choices by tapping into those subconscious processes.
That is just wild. So you're saying we have all this untapped potential just sitting there in our subconscious.
It's possible there might be all sorts of skills and abilities that we haven't even begun to explore because they're hidden below the level of conscious awareness.
This is all so fascinating. But it does make you wonder, are there any limits to the subconscious's influence? Is it really this all-powerful force that some people make it out to be?
That's a good question, and it's easy to get carried away with the idea of the subconscious as this puppet master controlling our every move. But there are some researchers who are starting to question that view.
Oh, really? So the subconscious might not be as dominant as we once thought.
That's the argument that some researchers are making. Professor Ben Newell, for example, believes that our conscious mind plays a much bigger role than we often give it credit for.
That's a more empowering perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not just slaves to our subconscious urges.
Exactly. Newell's work suggests that we have the capacity to reflect on our thoughts and behaviors and make deliberate choices. We're not just passively reacting to subconscious impulses.
So it's like a dance between the conscious and the subconscious.
I like that analogy. It's this interplay between these different levels of processing. And while the subconscious is undeniably powerful, it's not the only player in the game. Our conscious minds have a say too.
I'm starting to see how all of this fits together now. It's not about one being dominant over the other, but rather about understanding how they work together to shape who we are.
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting aspect of the subconscious, how it processes information differently from our conscious minds, especially in terms of speed.
Okay, so tell me, how is subconscious processing different? Is it faster, slower? Fill me in.
Well, it turns out that our subconscious minds are like these super fast processors, often working much quicker than our conscious minds can even keep up with.
So our subconscious is like a speed demon compared to our conscious mind.
You could say that. For example, Dr. Stanislaus Dehaney's research has shown that the subconscious can process emotional words much faster than neutral words.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, if I see the word danger, my subconscious is already reacting before I've even had time to consciously think about what it means.
Precisely. And that speed advantage helps explain why we can have these strong emotional reactions to things before we've even had a chance to process them logically. Our subconscious has already tagged it with an emotional label and triggered a response.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like our subconscious is always scanning for threats and rewards, keeping us safe and guiding us towards what's good for us.
That's a great way to think about it. And it highlights how important the subconscious is for our survival and well-being. But it also raises some interesting questions about how we can learn to manage those subconscious reactions, especially when they might not always be serving us.
Yeah, I can see how that could be a challenge. So how do we do that? How can we harness the power of the subconscious for positive change?
That's a great question, and one that we'll definitely dive into in the next part of our discussion. And we're back to the Mirex Media Podcast, continuing our exploration of the subconscious mind.
We sure are. We've covered a lot of ground already, talking about how the subconscious shapes our perceptions, influences our decisions, and even processes information at lightning speed.
It's really quite remarkable how much is happening beneath the surface, isn't it? All these intricate processes that we're not even aware of.
I know, it's really mind-blowing. But I keep coming back to this question. If the subconscious is so powerful, how can we learn to work with it instead of against it? Can we actually use this knowledge to make positive changes in our lives?
That's a really important question, and the good news is the answer is yes. There are definitely things we can do to harness the power of the subconscious for positive change. It starts with awareness, really paying attention to those subtle thoughts and feelings that bubble up from below the surface.
So like noticing those gut instincts or those moments of intuition.
Exactly. Those are often signs that your subconscious is trying to tell you something. And once you start paying attention to those signals, you can start to work with them. There are a lot of different approaches out there, from mindfulness and meditation to different types of therapy that can help you tap into those subconscious processes and start to shift them in a more positive direction.
So it's like learning to become more aware of our own internal landscape and then using that awareness to make changes.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding that we're not just at the mercy of our subconscious minds. We have the power to influence them, to retrain them, and to create new patterns of thought and behavior.
That's really empowering. It's like instead of being controlled by our subconscious, we can learn to co-create with it. So what are some practical examples of how people can do that? How can we actually start to harness this power in our everyday lives?
Well, one powerful technique is something called cognitive reframing. It's about learning to identify those negative thought patterns that might be holding you back, those subconscious beliefs that are limiting your potential.
So like if you have a subconscious belief that you're not good enough or that you're always going to fail.
Exactly. Those beliefs can really sabotage your efforts, even if you're not consciously aware of them. But with cognitive reframing, you can learn to challenge those negative thoughts and replace them with more positive and empowering ones. It's about creating new neural pathways, new ways of thinking that can lead to more positive outcomes.
That's amazing. So we can actually rewire our brains by changing our thoughts.
In a way, yes, our brains are incredibly adaptable. And with practice, we can actually train ourselves to think differently, to feel differently, and to behave differently. And that's the real power of understanding the subconscious. It gives us the tools to change our lives from the inside out.
This has been such an incredible conversation. We've explored so much about the subconscious mind, from its role in our everyday lives to its potential for personal growth.
It's been a real journey of discovery for me, too. It's fascinating to think about all the hidden forces that shape who we are and how we experience the world.
And the best part is, there's still so much more to learn. If you're as intrigued by the subconscious mind as we are, be sure to give this video a like and share it with someone who might appreciate a little mind-bending knowledge.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Mirex Media YouTube channel for more insightful content just like this.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the subconscious mind. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world within and around you.